childhood up, we have had to conform to a certain social game. And so we're in a constant state of competition. Good assistance, secret. You can't make a mistake.
Welcome, everybody, to Friends of Failure. I'm your host, Sam, and this is my co-host, Megan.
Hello.
I would like to introduce you to our guest this week, Rabbi Harry Rozenberg. How you doing?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm feeling very grateful and happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm right there with you. I'm feeling that vibe. It's really nice to be able to take time and talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about today and how, it goes with failure. But before we do that, I am kind of curious, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much. I have a feeling the best way I'm going to tell everyone about myself is through this conversation, but just as an overhead introduction, born and raised in Queens, New York. I moved to Israel about 10 years ago to purchase a farm to start an off-grid intentional community. And now I am back in New York on a mission that we will discuss, and between New York and Miami. I am a social entrepreneur. I've founded a few companies, including an online university and a brewing company. And my passion is in finding and networking with people from the lost tribes of Israel around the world and healing people through psychedelic medicine. Those are my two specialties of focus. And that's in a nutshell myself.
That was beautifully unfolded.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah, I like that. So that's a lot to cover. Where do we even begin, right? So the journey, right? If we were to start to talk about and get to the point of you, let's say moving to, you said Israel, right?
Yeah.
That happened 10 years ago?
Yeah, around 10 years ago.
Okay, so how did we get to that point, if I may ask?
It's a great question. It all started in a party in college.
As many great things do.
Where I had my own personal spiritual awakening. I was a regular American, I like to say, and just enjoying chicken nuggets and French fries and movies and all the things Americans are blessed to enjoy. Whether that's a blessing or not, we could discuss. But in the middle of all of that, I had a spiritual awakening where I had a calling to return to ancestral information and to return to the land of Israel. And I didn't know how to go about that, but I started studying and, kind of dropping everything I was doing, rebranding and reformatting my whole entire life. And I got wind of this ancient piece of information that spoke about how to have guaranteed success in a dream or a vision of yours. And so I deployed that strategy and that took me to Israel.
Well,
Wow.
I feel like we're going to need to hear more about that. Can't drop a bomb like that.
Well, I assume we're going to go into it. We just take little micro breaks, to recap.
Processing, comprehension, right? You said you got this information, the ancient information from a text, like a book?
Yeah, so basically when someone says, he quotes an ancient rabbi of Israel, the rabbis of Israel functioned in a form of like a blockchain from Moses. For anyone who does not into cryptocurrency, doesn't know about it, a blockchain is a trusted form of transactions today because it's peer reviewed. Internationally, everyone on the planet agrees that this happened and there's a consensus. So it's not owned by anyone human, the whole world agreed. So from Moses, there's been a transmission of information that every single generation basically gets blocked and we pass it on to the next generation. So as a rabbi, I can go back and tell you who my rabbi's rabbi was and his rabbi all the way back to Moses with a Wikipedia page for each one of these men and this information. So on this chain of men, on this blockchain has been transmitted information. And so that's from that information, I'm pulling this theory on how to guarantee success.
Wow. Wow. I don't even kind of leaves me a little speechless.
Yeah,
where
the analogy
okay.
is amazing because both of us, we don't have a ton of background with Judaism. We don't know the history like that, but the way you explained it with something current day, back to something ancient was perfect. Like that's the best delivery I think we could have gotten.
My first question would be, I guess, would be, so let's say I have the understanding of this is how you generate guaranteed success. Is failure a part of the process of getting to the success, or when you have guaranteed success, you just bypass failure? That would be my first question.
It's a trick question because it's almost as if there's going to be guaranteed failures. But in the world of truth, we wouldn't consider it a failure to begin with. We look at it as part of the roadmap. So the word failure does not exist in that pursuit of which I'm discussing.
So without failure, is there no success? Is it just the journey?
So you could have like horrible things happen. Your company can crash and close. You could lose all your money, your investments, so many unfortunate things that could happen. But the mindset that looks at that thing as failure and not, okay, this happened, let's re-strategize and pivot, let's focus, let's see what the lesson learned is, let's move forward. So failure is a form of giving up, is a state of mind of giving up. And in the school of thought that I belong to, that's not an option. That would be equivalent to someone in an army deserting the army and leaving the ranks of war. If you're in an army and you get injured and you have to leave the ranks of war, it's very understandable. But you heal and you get back to the army. And what happens when a soldier comes back to the front lines? He gets a standing ovation. Everyone's clapping, gets a Medal of Honor. But what happens to the soldier who leaves the army and deserts the army? It's criminal. In ancient days, you'd be liable to the death penalty for deserting your army. So the same thing is with your vision or what you actually believe in. There's no option to leave the ranks. You could have a terrible thing like, a failure, so to say, and crumble. But if you hold on and say that was a failure and you live in that reality and you don't see it as an opportunity to pivot, then that's where we have to start off and fix that part.
Yeah. Okay. I'm about that. And that makes sense.
I'll tell you why, just to add one more thing. Let's say, like, for example, and it happens to all of us, something happens where it looks really bad and we're bugging out and we have to like figure it out and we go forward. And it was like the worst thing and it ruined months of our life. And then like 2 years from later, you can look back and be like, wow, I can't believe it. That was a blessing in disguise. Look what came out of that. Look where I am now. Look what happened. So like what? You were bugging out for nothing because at the end of the day, it was going to be good. That's like giving someone like a check in the mail for $5 million and he's still bugging out that he's poor. It's like, no, it's in the mail. It's inevitably coming to you. Enjoy the 5 million mentally knowing it's coming. So if you're so certain that the future is going to be good, then now it's like for nothing you're bugging out, because in 2 years from now you're going to look back and be like, oh, I shouldn't have bugged that. Don't do that. Just live now in the moment and say, okay, everything's for the good. Let's figure out how to pivot.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I definitely have kind of changed my path over probably the last year, maybe you could say 2 years, where changing the format of how I think about stuff. And a lot of it for me was the self-speak, the way I would talk to myself and the way I would produce the thoughts in my head. A lot of it was autopilot, which was part of the problem. Because if you're not thinking for yourself, I feel like other people are thinking for you, or they're instigating kind of the process of thought in your head. That's kind of how I wrap my head around it. And, there was a certain point in time, I guess in the last 12 months, where I had certain things that I wanted to accomplish. And, I had to fall down several times and get back up. And I just had to keep doing that. But it eventually got to the point where I didn't beat myself up anymore. I would fall down and be like, okay, well, you don't have any other option because you made a commitment to this thing and the completion of it. So I would just get back up, kind of brush myself off, and then keep going until, I got to success. Right. And I do think it's interesting how easily it is for myself to look back and identify those times where I just gave up too easily on something, right? Where I'd be like, I want to learn how to play guitar. And I played it one time and it was like, man, I've got really fat sausage fingers. And then I never played it again. Like, that's all it took. I had fat fingers and I was like, I'm done. That's it. I made it to the end of the line. It wasn't even that I could I'll use the word failure. I couldn't even fail trying and then get back up and go again. All it took was I'm struggling with my fingers and I quit, right? I can identify that and not beat myself up. But I do think that that's something that a lot of us can relate to, maybe globally, right? Of what you're talking about is a very large thing, right? And for some of us, it might take soul searching or a lot of self-development, and it can be daunting, right? I'm sure maybe you've even met people where the task wasn't even that large, right? And they were like, hey, wait, never mind, this isn't what I signed up for, and they bailed. But I guess my whole point is I do like your mentality of there isn't stopping, you just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, it's a daunting task to train your brain to think that way, but there is information and resources available for people who are interested. And if we had to have like a modern day term for it, we would call it the path towards the super chill. And when you say what's the super chill, you say the super chill is when you've fermented a chill. Let's say I haven't been angry in 10 years or frustrated in 10 years or anxiety or worry. I have gone 10 years straight of just being grateful and appreciating everything on this planet. So that ferments into a state of mind that you are you, and that's you could just be that. So it's really hard to pitch someone that, but we're not really talking about anything spiritual or metaphysical here. We're talking about proper hedonism. You know, we are all trying to enjoy this planet, and our brains were designed to enjoy this planet. And what I've noticed is a whole generation of, you know, people looking to enjoy the planet and not enjoying it. So that's where we need a code red intervention and be like, what's going on inside of our minds that we're not enjoying the ride, and we have these emotions of anxiety and frustration and doubt and all these things. So it really is taking someone who wants to properly enjoy his time on this planet to invest in this roadmap towards inner peace of mind. So those type of people I feel like are out there, and if you pitch it that way, it seems a little bit more exciting than like spiritual work on myself, which like you know, that's just, I can't relate to that.
I get it. Do you agree with phrases such as we're all one, or we all come from the same thing, right? So you'll hear it said as you know, we're all made from the same material of the universe, right? Like we're all stardust, or however people want to say it. Do you agree with that in any kind of format, or do you think it's different and maybe we've all been kind of misled?
No, as we've been teaching for thousands of years, that we are made up of two realities, us right now. We are part soul and part human. That's the word Adam for Adam. Adam is the Aleph, is the first letter of the alphabet, represents divinity, and Dam is blood. Those two together makes Adam. We're divinity and body together in one. In regards to divinity, we believe that we are carved, our soul is carved literally from the creator, the designer of this whole simulation, the designer of this universe. What you could refer to as God, or you could refer to as the source, however you want to refer to it. We all have a piece of that oneness inside of us. And there's a whole reason that we're not going to have enough time in this show to discuss why that unfolded and how that unfolded and the mechanisms which have been passed down for thousands of years since the time of Abraham. But for all intents and purposes, we would say that, yes, we are all come from one. We are all one. When I level up spiritually, I level up other people on the planet spiritually because we're connected. When I think about someone and I pray for that person, he can actually feel it because we're connected at our root source, at our base. Now, regarding our physical body, we're made up of earth, of minerals and materials, the same things that are floating around the universe.
So then it leads me to the question of how, one, have you ever experienced or obtained enlightenment? And do you think anyone can do that?
I think that's a tricky question. I was fortunate in my own right because before I became a rabbi in my high school, college days, I had my own psychedelic experiences where now obviously it's a very trendy thing where people experience enlightenment in those psychedelic states. So I had my own personal enlightenment where I had, like I said in the beginning, ancestral emotions emerge from prior generations, which is also a very common thing in psychedelics. So I had my own spiritual awakening. That being said, I don't think psychedelics is the go-to one-all, say-all path towards enlightenment. Enlightenment really comes, I believe, from just feeling good inside of your brain because you're certain the universe is good and you're certain your certainty about that creates your trust in the universe. And when you trust in the universe, your whole life is just what we call enlightened. Obviously, it has to do a lot with your diet also, what chemicals you're putting in your body. Certain chemicals we're putting in our body today completely take our opportunity away from spiritual expansion of the mind. So there's a roadmap. Now, I didn't say I got to enlightenment or I'm even there yet. I'm on the pursuit just as well. So if anyone has any tips for me, I always definitely appreciate people reaching out and giving me life hacks when they're available.
Right on.
That's awesome.
I only bring that up because I'm currently listening to a book that it's been a couple of chapters now where it's talking about enlightenment, and it talks about a lot of like the science of the brain, but then also the aspect of ourselves that is not the body, right? Which you kind of touched on, like the soul. And it's something that I struggle to even wrap my head around, trying to comprehend what enlightenment is. And I asked myself the question during this week of, if I were to experience enlightenment, I think that I would have to go, oh, that's what that is. But I also don't know, because I haven't experienced something like that, right? Where it's such an experience that I can go back to it and go, that was a feeling of enlightenment or whatever, right? So I just kind of, the curiosity made me ask,
Yes, I think there's two different paths. There's the path of that instant enlightenment, someone who's sitting in a psychedelic shamanic circle somewhere, or going into his brain using those chemicals. There's such a thing called instant enlightenment, and it's happening to people across the planet. But there's another thing called fermented enlightenment, which is you're living your mind as if you already had that psychedelic experience. I don't need to do that. I could just tell me what the outcome is, tell me how people are thinking, tell me about ego death, and maybe I could implement it. And if you do that, you're not going to feel enlightened day one, maybe not day 30. You may have the hardest 30 days of your entire life trying to sync your mind this way. But guess what? On day 60, you fermented it just like wine. It's the start. It's just grape juice. It's just going to be grape juice. But after 30 days, 60 days, guess what? It's something new. So then enlightenment, you retroactively realize, oh, that was the path towards enlightenment, of resyncing my brain to be more loving, trusting, and humble, and all the other things that come with enlightenment.
So that, for me, that kind of triggers the question, is there a wrong way to become enlightened? Is there a failing path to that? Or like you said, it just means your journey is longer. It's just going to take you longer to figure it out. Maybe it was a false blip. You thought you had the whole thing worked out, but you have to work a few more years on it before you truly get there.
Now, the tricky thing in this topic is, I think, spiritual leaders and humans and what I call middlemen. There's a lot of like enlightenment middlemen out there, and that's really dangerous, because you can't like have your like hookup, your plug to the source through like a guy.
Yeah.
When you have the source in your own brain, it's like a guy who's got solar panels on his roof, doesn't even know how to use them. So he goes to like buy gasoline. It's like, no, you got your own solar panels. Like, you got this. So the most important thing is people not getting caught in movements or leaders or anything that's standing in between them and freedom of the mind, of just trusting that this universe is okay and loving.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer, because we've all seen documentaries on cults that use that word, that is, a sacred word, a spiritual word, in the wrong sense, and drive a purpose of their own with it. And that branches off for me. What is your difference in between spirituality and then religion? How do you see those as separate, or are they the same?
No, for sure not. Because spirituality really just means the wants and the nature of the soul. Like physicality is like, oh, I love hamburgers, I love naps, I love movies, I love French fries. Like, so what is the soul like? So the soul likes giving, sharing, caring, love. The soul has a spiritual taste for things. So in terms of spirituality, anyone on the planet can tap into spirituality by being sensitive, enacting their inner feminine side of caring. But now religion is a whole nother world. This religion is the attempt of ancient humans to preserve some sense of sanity and clarity that was on the planet at a certain point. And the tricky thing about that is, if you just look at the history, I apologize, there's a helicopter or something over my head. That if you look back at history and track that, you see a lot of ego and man getting like in that blockchain and being like, oh, I had a vision and God came to me, so this is what it is. So with religion, I'm very skeptical in general about the concept and the term. Obviously I'm biased. I'm part of my own blockchain, but I if I wasn't, let's say like I didn't believe in God or I didn't believe in religion, I would just be very skeptical about any movement that was like a one man came up with an idea thing. And the interesting thing about the Torah and Mount Sinai is it's the only time in human history where there was a mass revelation of God, where 600,000 men, millions of humans experienced the divinity, experienced God, and each one told their children. Whereas, the other religions out there are mostly based on one man's vision. But that's not to discredit any other religion, because I think religion's a silly thing right now, because there's children in Africa starving and people in slave trades around the world. So it's like religion's a cup of tea that we could talk about when we get to world peace, like whose God was right. But in that regard, I just do see a difference between religion and spirituality.
I think, really quick, I think the blockchain, coming back for this one, that it is kind of a telephone game from ancient times to the different branches, the tons of branches from that same branch that Judaism comes from, and all the way to Christianity. I grew up, my parents grew up Baptist, and then I grew up kind of Baptist, and then by the end of it, we were Unitarian Universalist, which, if you're familiar, if you're not, it basically is you study a different religion every week. It's based on the teachings of Christ, like in the center, but they want you to be well versed in every one. I don't identify with it now, but it was the best version of it for me. And it was really beautiful to try to see each version of different stories with similar, morals behind it.
Yeah. The other thing I have to bring up is, I know that there has been scientific developments that are trying to prove or have proven how in our DNA there is coding from ancestors that we don't even know about that allowed us to be here today, right? Like, and there is information that is being passed down, generation to generation, right? And one thing that I am now curious about is, I think the physical and the spiritual are two different things that can work together, maybe as one. But so as an individual, if I was trying to seek guidance on how to tap into the ancient spirituality that I think is there, I mean, how do I even wrap my head around that? And then two, where would you begin to, get your hands on the grapes that can ferment and become the wine, right? If I'm using that analogy correctly. I might have just butchered that really bad, and it's fine to correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that was great. I mean, it's a little trickier because the amount of time and work that really goes into fixing oneself and working on oneself. I was fortunate to spend many years in what's called a yeshiva, which is a ancient Jewish institution for Torah study. Its equivalent would be like a dojo, to be a monk, a samurai warrior monk. I'd go to the high mountains of Japan to a dojo, and I would spend a few years to train. So I was able to spend those 2 years like locked in this information system and recalibrating and studying every day and working, which gave me an edge over humanity, that I had the luxury to invest that time and the access to it. That being said, I think with the internet and information out there, people have done a great job of extracting the gleams of this ancient blockchain of information and open sourcing it online in beautiful, concise deliveries. Myself, I give a weekly lecture for about 15 or 20 minutes that I post every Friday on my Instagram page and on YouTube and on Facebook, where I'm giving a spiritual extraction from that week's portion of Torah. So we can see from start to end how we'll take a simple verse from the Torah and go through the last 2,000 years of sages and pull out very crucial points that are good for our mental health and our ability to enjoy the planet.
I like that. That's awesome. So, I mean, the path that you're on, you've been on it for a while now, right? And I guess time is strictly relative in maybe measuring the distance gone, right? Or trying to comprehend time with this physical reality. So you moved to Israel and you started a project, I guess is what I'll call it, or you can tell me what you would call it. So when you started that, I mean, where are you now? I mean, because it's been something that's been going on for a decade now.
Right. So I followed that ancient advice, which led to me being able to acquire the land and get to Israel and start this mission that I was on. And from then till now was filled with failures and red lights and ups and downs and lefts and rights and all the obstacles you could ever imagine a human would have to face to get to where I am now.
I mean, yeah, because one, so you were born and raised in America. You go to the, I guess, other side of the world. I mean, how much did you know about that area before you went there? I mean, hopefully you did a little bit of research, right? But even if you studied on it, getting there is still going to be kind of a shock, right? I mean, it's a totally different environment.
Yeah, you definitely go into a little bit of culture shock. But the beautiful thing about the Jewish people is that we really do act like a family. So if I'm traveling at any part of the world and I get, layover and I'm stranded or whatever it is, there's a guaranteed within a few mile radius, a Jewish person who I don't know who, but I can call, who will pick me up, give me a warm meal. If I need a loan, give me a loan. So especially in Israel now, which is the Jewish homeland, so to say, quote unquote, we could discuss that, later on, what that really means. Everyone there is family and your brothers and your sisters. So you're immediately always brought into a community. There's always community events. People, it's like a Smurf village. I can't even explain it, of the love that's being experienced on the ground in Israel right now between its inhabitants. There is a lot of in-house fighting and politics, obviously, and stuff, but that aside,
There's community still. Yeah.
there's a tremendous sense of community. So I was able to adapt well there. Yeah, it worked out really smoothly.
And you said the words off grid, which is something that I'm always curious about, but very rarely do I get to interact with anyone that even wants to talk about what it would mean to become a person that creates a situation of being off grid. And I've heard this, that, and some crazy things. One thing that I remember when I was a kid is hearing a story about a guy, and I think it was Florida. I mean, this was 15 years ago. Being pursued and kind of in trouble for the fact that he was going off grid and trying to live basically in the swamp. And it was like, hey, I don't need to pay an electric company. I have a generator, or I have solar power, whatever it was. I don't need, this because I'm growing my own food, or whatever it was. And it was like, hey, you can't do that. And people didn't really feel outraged because everyone's just so used to just doing it the way it is, right? So have you successfully created a place where it's self-supportive? I mean, it takes care of itself.
So today, currently, we do have a beautiful plot of land, and there are people living on the land. I wouldn't say that we've gone off grid yet, or we're fully self-sustainable, but what we have done is create on a smaller scale the prototype of a working system that could take 100 to 1,000 families off grid if implemented correctly. So that includes, electricity production and permaculture and our goats and our chickens, water filtration, and aquaponic growing with the fish and the vertical farming. We're storing water underground to keep it cool during the hot days, keep it warm during the cold days. We're implementing all these we have a biogas toilet, a whole little system that if we said, hey, we can actually take this, replicate it, and scale it, then it would work. So right now, part of the reason I'm in America is to work on a game plan to actually build the first real size one in Israel and take 1,000 families and say, hey, we don't need food, resources, or anything anymore. We could just live.
I really admire that, because there are times that I sit and go down the rabbit hole and ask myself the question of, so, you can call it black and white, good and evil, the balance of maybe the universe, right? I feel that both ends of the spectrum have to exist. And maybe I just haven't come to an ability to comprehend that it's all simultaneously happening, right? The good and the bad. But there does seem to be a tremendous amount of suffering that is needless. it's not necessary. So starving, right? I don't understand why we have people starving to death, right? And I also haven't even tried to wrap my head around how would you once and for all end starvation, right? There are tons of things in terms of suffering that I think can be resolved, but because people can't make money off of it, or people don't want to think about the weight of that, right? But I feel like this is kind of what the answer would be, right? Is everyone learns how to function in that capacity, and it stopped relying on, you know, Walmart, or stop relying on TXU. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And that's basically what happened in my mind, because in my path towards enlightenment, I came to a certain point where I just felt so good. It felt so happy to be alive on this planet, just in my natural state. I realized there was more to gain in happiness that I would never be able to touch unless everyone around me was happy. And I realized that my, as quote unquote, my chill was capped because of all this suffering on the planet. So as a hedonist, in the pursuit of enjoying this planet, I had to set out, or I trying to set out and work with other people to make sure the world is okay, make sure that everyone is fed, everyone has their own solar panels, is hooked up to a blockchain, has their greenhouses, is on an economy where they could trade their goods and resources and assets. And then I can go back to my little four corners of the world and in my house, and I could sit and I could enjoy myself finally.
Man.
Yeah, it's that service to others. A lot of religions kind of call on that, but not a ton of people actually act on it. But it's the most rewarding thing. Like you said, when you get to that chill cap, when you personally, you're good. Like you don't need anything else in your mind. You look around, you go, oh, why are they crying? Or, oh, why can't they eat? That makes me feel like I need to figure out something so they feel like I feel, right? Just that human response.
Yes, that's the evolution of the path towards enlightenment, leads towards having to help other people.
Yeah.
When I think about some of the books I've read, or some of the people I guess I've listened to, there's, I guess, almost like a seed that they're trying to plant of, maybe people spin it in as if it's a negative thing, but the whole, it can seem selfish that helping other people does make you feel good, but the whole point is that we're raising each other up, right? And so me helping someone do better, feel better, be taken care of, find happiness will in turn also create happiness for me, and that's not a bad thing, right? Also, I've read it being said as we are reflections of each other, right? And right now in this moment, the three of us are talking to each other, and it's happening as it should. Like we were meant to be here having this conversation, and in some form or fashion, we are reflections of each other. And so me helping you and you helping me directly benefits us. And so why wouldn't we want to do that, right? And I think it's easy to get distracted, and I think it's very easy to, you know, I call it the rat race, right? And that can apply to whatever aspect of life you want, where we just get consumed by whatever it is we're trying to obtain. And for me, I find myself trying harder now than I did maybe even 5 years ago of finding peace, right? And in some form or fashion, I think how I'm supposed to obtain that is through balance of self, right? Stop having the really happy days and the really sad days and find the neutral. I'm not saying don't be happy or don't be sad. I just mean at one point in my life, my emotions seemed really turbulent, and maybe even now they do too sometimes, but there is something to be said that peace, in my perspective, is a balance, right? Do you think that there is a way to obtain a very high level of happiness and that's just it? Or is it always, no matter how the journey goes, there's always going to be the up and the down, you know?
Right. So two things. first of all, just to address your first point, a lot of people, in our religion, we believe that when you give, you get. So people are like, oh, I give selfishly. I give to this guy because I know I get back. So everyone's like, oh, is that a legit thing? Like, is that, giving to get back? So I said, you know how to know if it's a good thing or not? It's very easy. Say to yourself right now, if the whole entire world was doing this one thing, giving to get back, would it be a good world or a bad world? And we'd be like, oh, it'd be a great world. And it'd be like, oh, amazing. So that's a good thing then. So if the whole world was giving selfishly so they can get back, that'd be the best world in the world. So it was clearly, we were designed to have the attribute of selfishness, but we just don't know how to apply it properly. So it's not like in the path towards enlightenment, we don't squash being selfish. We just properly be selfish. I hook myself up by hooking other people up selfishly as part of my investment portfolio of how to survive this planet. And the answer to your second question about the happiness, etc., I would say, just personally, I don't see myself being happy or sad. I'm more of in a state of spectatorship. I'm watching something unfold like I'm in a movie theater. I'm being entertained because we're alive on this planet, and it's a fascinating thing to be alive on this planet and see what's going on and learn about it. So someone's like, oh, you so excited? I'm like, I don't know. I don't get excited. Like, I'm just here, or how was that? Was it a great time? Like, yeah, I'm always having a good time, so I try not to go too far in any direction and just kind of hold space in, I'm sure I'll be really happy when the whole world is eating and not starving, but like, there's no room for that right now. So I just enjoying and, constantly, but happy, I guess, if someone tells a good joke, you could laugh, but I try not to go too up and down in moods, but more just that everything is equal to me.
Man, because I think it's a good point to bring up that things can be developed through, let's say, the process of psychedelics, right? But I think the mindfulness aspect of it is maybe the important part, right? So if you were mindfully utilizing something to help you obtain an understanding, or maybe even unlocking your ability to access the ancient information, versus, like the easy one would be smoking marijuana, I feel good, and then going, hey, I want to feel good again, and then doing it over and over and over just for the sake of, hey, I want to feel good, and maybe as like a stress relief, right? I mean, it's two different things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anything that we fall into habit and pattern that's not being used to serve the universe is tricky. So if someone's like, hey, you know what, we got a weekly meeting with the guys and we smoke a little and we talk about like how to feed Africa, I'd be like, all right, that's great stuff. If someone's like, you know what, I just find myself smoking and watching Netflix all day, I'd be like, okay, you got to break out a little bit. Obviously enjoy your time, but if that's like your 24/7 reality, we have to break out of it. And you're right, whereas opposed to, if someone does have a psychedelic experience or something, those are known to be anti-addictive. So someone who's smoking cannabis all day may have a psychedelic experience and say, hey, wait a minute, I've been smoking too much. I gotta take it easy and recalibrate my life and fix myself up. So it's the luck of the draw, but setting is really important, to be around good people and to be in a good environment when you do that spiritual work.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it kind of, from what I've heard, you need to be in a good mindset to go down that path at all. You should not do your first attempt at psychedelics or anything like that if you're not in the headspace to do it. Do you agree with that? Would that set you up for failure in that kind of path?
I don't really agree with that. I think there's an ideal scenario where if you want to make the most and take the most out of this, they compare a psychedelic experience to a vessel. You get filled up with light. So let's say if I take a plastic cup and I pour boiling hot water in it, it's going to melt the cup. The cup's not going to hold the water. But if I have a glass cup and I pour the water in it, the glass cup will hold the water. So too, when a human goes to that enlightened state where there's a lot of light, how much of a vessel you are to hold or receive that light will be what your experience is. So the ideal is to be totally prepared spiritually for such an experience. But at the same time, I could tell you firsthand of just, my last 10 years of seeing things unfold, I've seen the most scary cases of people attempting to commit suicide and self-harm and reduction, literally in front, just seeing people try to do that, and then having someone professional administer psychedelics to them, and watching in a split second their face go from terrified and fear and crying to a smile with bliss on their face. And they say, why would I ever want to hurt myself? Why would I do that to myself? And then you look a few years later down the line, they've built themselves up, they fixed their life. So there's radical intervention also, and there's planned interventions, but to everyone their own. And it's not for everyone, and it's not the exclusive path towards enlightenment, but Lord, that's a trendy topic today. It's happening.
Yeah.
I've read some stories about severe cases of PTSD being treated by what you were talking about, right? Where it's like, hey, you're under certain supervision. It's all kind of laid out in a certain format. And you're very, very much observed and just kind of protected through the experience, right? And some of these people went from years and years, maybe even decades of dealing with a trauma, and then through what you're talking about, they do find a way back, right? Maybe to like the natural way of existing. Because I think a lot of stuff that we get taught and conditioned for is kind of working against us, right? And so for some of us, I do think it takes something to kind of shock the system, I guess. I don't have a lot of
that's the way psychedelics
about
basically work, because what happens in the psychedelic state is the frontal cortex of your brain, your neurological network is being hyperactivated, and that's where a lot of your patterns, your habits, and your traumas are stored, which programs the AI that we are. We run on trauma. If a dog bit me when I was 5 years old, now when I'm 14 years old and I hear a dog bark, my body's going to say, Harry, I'm here to protect you. Be scared. And I'm going to get scared. And so that's all stored in our memory network. So when someone does take psychedelics, it's like almost like pouring Drano down a sink that's been clogged for all these years, that a lot of those habits and patterns and traumas and memories that you are holding on because you think it protects you. Your brain has got your back. Your brain is doing you a favor. Your brain is like, dogs are bad. Like, brain, you don't know anything else besides the experience that happened. Dogs are actually man's best friend. Dogs are great. And there's therapy dogs and blind walking dogs. And I have dogs on my farm for the sheep. Dogs are amazing. It's just you had a bad experience and you have to deal with that now through reflection or plant medicine. However you want to go about that. That's up to you.
Man, I was not ready for that Drano reference. It's like pouring Drano. I was like, oh man, the intensity of that, right?
It seems intense, but on the other side of it, when you've let go of some of the weights that you've been carrying, you're like, oh wow, I only have one time on this planet. I'm stuck in my brain till I'm 120. I'm glad I did a little upgrade.
It can be needed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's like someone who has like do a little renovation on your house. When there's a moldy kitchen, you could get a new kitchen. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. I think another way I've heard it explained is a change in perspective, like a very quick change from, like you said before, someone's depressed, they're seeing this negative, dark cloud, and then it's just kind of switched with that drug or psychedelic or whatever it is, that experience, and it forces them to look through a different lens. Is that kind of, do you agree with that statement? Or
I think statistics agree with that statement. That's statistically what's happening to almost all the users.
Yeah. I've talked, I used to know people that had no problem talking about their experiences of taking acid and what they would feel. And what was really interesting is I'm pretty sure all of them, when I would try to have an understanding without ever doing it myself of like, how would I relate to that experience? And at the end of the conversation, it was always, truthfully, you can't. There are certain things that happen, and maybe it's the Drano effect is, I guess, what I'll call it, the Drano effect of how maybe it allows or forces your brain to kind of let go of some of those ingrained whatever it is, right? Like the fear of dogs because you got attacked by a dog when you're 5, or the fear of water because you almost drowned when you were 6, right? And that's got to be the case, right? Because that's got to be an experience that you can't really fake, I guess is what I'm trying to get to
Yes.
is you can't fake it, right? You have to literally do the work
Yeah.
and have it happen.
Right. That's like they always say, what, when you want to explain the psychedelic experience to someone, imagine if someone who is blind came up to you and asked you what the color red looks like. What would you tell him?
Mm.
Yeah.
There is not one word you have in
No.
your lexicon or sentence to describe to him what the color red looks like. He simply cannot fathom that reality because that's one sense he doesn't have. So with our five senses, there's that sixth sense, which is the spiritual bond that we have with our soul. And until it's felt in your wildest imagination, you cannot comprehend what that feeling is like until it happens. And then that's, a reference to sight, because there's actually an eyeball in the middle of our brain that's responsible, the pineal gland, which people suspect and theorize is possible for the psychedelic experience, the secretion of DMT and where the tryptamines are. And that's an eyeball. So, there's a language of seeing there as well.
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of people would know that as the third eye, right?
Yeah, it's a literal eyeball. It's got the muscles and the rods and the cornea and the retina. It's built like an eyeball lodged in the middle of our head.
That's what I learned today because I didn't.
I've read things about that, of how there's evidence, you always hear like Egyptians or this or that, and how in their art they would try to explain it to you, the pineal gland, and how they learned how to use it and in their favor, right? And I always end up going back to the question in my head of how did we get to a point where it seems a lot of this very useful information, instead of being passed out to everyone with the intent of everyone understanding it and utilizing it for the greater good, it's turned into it's getting more and more suppressed, right? I even said today, sometimes it seems like we have this illusion that people want us to learn math and science and have understanding of knowledge and how to apply it. But then at the same time, when you really look at the actions of today, it feels or appears that it's being suppressed, right? Like you get taught like, oh, I'm not good at math, so it's okay for you to be the person who goes, well, I'm not good at math, so I'm just not going to know any math. I mean, like just because it's not easy doesn't mean you shouldn't try to obtain it, right?
Yeah, for sure not. But also, we can't make these decisions based on societal pressures of what the American government suggests is better for us to live our life. So that's not the metric for success or not. But within that pursuit, you still can never give up, but you can never beat yourself up if you can't fit into the square that they say you have to be to succeed or to be successful. That's crazy.
Right. Where I like to think that we are all one. I do sometimes feel like I desperately try to hold on to being an individual. And I wonder if we all struggle with that, right? But man, there are some days where I'm like, man, like it's all connected and I can see it clearly, or at least I feel like I can see it clearly. And, I'm trying to be as kind as I can and do what feels like the right thing and sharing and caring and just being a helpful person. And then there's other days where it's like we're all alone, every single one of us.
Right. That's inevitable. So when you're in those ups, you have to be like mentally preparing for the roller coaster for the down. So when you're up, it's like you're filling yourself. I call it the camel chill. Like before a camel goes into the desert, it drinks lots of water because then it can like drip out that water over long periods of time. So I always say people should like harness your chill when you're feeling good, like hold on to it, put it in a reserve tank. So then when you're not feeling good, when you're bugging out, you could at least tap into that. So I always have to remind myself, because it happens to all of us, and say, hey, you know what? It's a great moment right now, but crazy things are going to happen. And I just have to see through it and stay strong and like get back to this moment. And I'm like mentally prepared for those thoughts in my mind to come to me to suggest reasons why I should bug out. And then I have to be very quick to fight back and like be like, no, you don't have court right now. You're not holding the seat in my mind.
So first thing, I think you need to put out a book of chill, because there's so many chill-isms that we could learn from. And then the second thing is, more recently, I've been trying to stop myself from thinking in absolutes, like this is going to last forever. I always feel this way. I can't get out of this, that kind of thing. And just that alone, thinking that it's not permanent, kind of goes into what Sam said and what you said, that if you're down, you know, it's not forever, because there's eventually an end, whether that's, you know, feeling happier or you're 90 years old and you die. Like eventually the bad will end. It is not permanent.
Yeah,
What do you
I was talking to my friend today. He said to me, he's like, listen, my future's not looking so good. You know, I don't think I'm going to get married. It's something about that. I said, you don't have the ability to look into your future, so I'm not so concerned with your thoughts. Like, he's like, you're right, I don't have the ability. I was like, all right, so save yourself from going down that road right now. Just come back.
You don't want to fortune tell yourself, because I think we've all done it. Definitely. I know I've done it for myself, where I'm like, I don't see this going any type of good. And then years later, I'm like, oh, that was perfect. That was exactly how I wanted it to go.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to trust your intuition. If you're in a relationship with someone and you're like, okay, let me use, you know, we say, well, an ancient saying is a 2,000-year-old saying, who is smart? He or she who foresees the outcome of things and then acts like in advance. Like, that's the definition of smart. You see the outcome of things. So based on that, you can know who you are now. So we apply that to the outcome of this reality is going to be all good. So now it's all good because I know the outcome and I'm applying it now. So if you're in any toxic relations or stuff, you have to get out of there for sure and cleanse your life and make sure you're around good people. But at the same time, if you're bugging yourself out about things that you think you should be doing or not doing, don't bug yourself out. Just return to the now and carry on the path trying to get there. Don't speculate. Don't get caught in speculation land is the number one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I struggle sometimes because I am working on having essentially what you're talking about, that mindset, right? Of if you know that the outcome is it's going to be fine, everything's working out the way it should. But sometimes, like, I'll be around really negative people and I am good, I'm good, and then all of a sudden it breaks my wall and then it's affecting me. And I feel like I get my energy is pulled down and then my mentality goes with it, right? And then it's my job to like recover and get back. And you know, that's one of those things that I can admittedly say I'm trying to work on, of, you know, keeping my chill through whatever the circumstance is. You know, not that like if someone were to pass away and I'm at a funeral that I'm just going to be like, hey man, like it is what it is, right? Like there is a process of grieving and whatnot. But I mean, again, if I go back to talking about balance, right? Everything's going to be okay. Why not think about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, also with people passing away and a lot of suffering in the world, you know, to a degree, if we believe that this world is reincarnation and it's a soul world, we're kind of like experiencing a dream right now. We're in some type of simulation. So a certain degree, you can't take it too serious because it is a simulation and we're all coming back to one. So did he really die, or is he just somewhere where I'm going to have to reunite with him soon in the future? So also when it comes to grieving and being sad, it's just that this is where we are. This is the process. So it's also included in not being in the emotional roller coaster too much. Yeah, obviously it's not I lost my father this year, so I understand the pain of a broken heart. But at the same time, I know wherever he is, I'm the next stop on the train to see him. So I'm very excited about that. And now I get to bring honor to wherever he is by my actions I do down here. But that being the case, you really have to fortify your chill, because when you do run into people who claw at your chill, who come into your space, into your mind, and bring their negativity, you're going to have reinforced walls, and an army, and a fortress in your mind prepared for that oncoming aggression from another human. So that's where there's a lot of strategies to deploy of how to deal with toxic people, how to draw lines and healthy boundaries where they know if they want to cross these lines, they have to do it in a certain way where you're comfortable with as well. And that's called a chill intervention, which has to happen every once in a while when people step out of line.
Add it to the book of chill.
Here's my thing. We probably could talk for
hours, yeah.
several hours. And I still would have questions and the desire to proceed, but we are about at that point. So even though I can't fathom, maybe it's just luck of the draw today, because I'm sure there's plenty of things that you could share with anybody, right? That could be beneficial. But if you in this moment had to pinpoint something and go, hey, this is a piece of advice or something everyone should ponder, what would you kind of throw out there for our listeners and us today?
Okay. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
Anytime.
Yeah. If I had just to say, like, I would want to talk for a little bit longer or a little bit less. If I just had this one little quick thing to say, just to give a heads up, I would say, based on this ancient blockchain of information I'm a part of, we have set times and dates, appointed dates for a paradigm shift in the world where we're going to enter a period of light and love and rectification of, humanity, basically. And we're in a very auspicious time now where there's a great amount of light and love in the universe trying to come down to humanity. And the best advice I can give people is to make yourself available, to be present and to say, I say it out loud. I want to be a part. I want to heal. I want to grow. I want to have love inside of me. And when that great day does come, you will have a smooth integration into what the mindset of the future may be like. It sounds crazy to say it, but for those who are feeling it, will feel it and know what to do with it.
I'm definitely picking up what you're putting down, is how I would say that. Because I am on a path of trying to figure out myself and the things that are happening. And, luckily you're not alone, right? There are other individuals that know what you're talking about, and they are spreading that information and they are talking about it, even if people are not ready to receive it. Right. So I genuinely appreciate that. I think that was the best thing you probably could have said out of all the things that you could have pulled from. Right. So thank you for that, genuinely. With that being said, even though it just feels absolutely insignificant, let's go to Megan's corner for social media.
So social media, none of it matters. That's what we've taken from this. Please don't follow us, but go follow Rabbi Harry. Sorry, I follow Rabbi Harry, and we'll post some videos, some little clips on our meaningless social media. But definitely some knowledge to gather from it. And then our favorite part, we just want to ask for the masses to send in their own failures. This can be completely anonymous if you're not ready to yell to the heavens your own mistakes, or you can put your name to it. We completely welcome either option. You just send those into friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com. You can find that in the links below wherever you are watching or listening to this. There we go.
And I think you had something to say, maybe about social media.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's very important, social media, because right now more than ever we need to attract like-minded individuals to join arms. The fight we're up against is a divide and conquer fight where it's keeping humans separate from connecting with each other and locked in our own minds. So to make change in this planet, we don't need that many humans. So we just need a bunch of good ones to get together for a good cause and a good change, and we have the power. So on social media, I'm sure it'll help us attract them all over time.
There
a way more positive message than we gave up. I like that.
I think where we come from sometimes is that how many people do I know that get on social media because they're trying to connect with like-minded people, and more so they want to get their opinion out there. They want to be able to perform a mindless activity of, pictures and whatever it is, right?
But, yeah, we got to be those people that.
But I think at the end of this podcast, I think it's important for myself and maybe everyone a part of it to realize that the perspective in your head is way more important than maybe people will lead us to believe, right? And the thoughts that we produce genuinely affect not only you, of course, but everyone around you, right? And so there it is.
Yeah.
Again, I really appreciate you coming on today. I had a great time. This this is a conversation that cannot be stuffed into 1 hour, and yet we tried anyway. And I'm grateful for that. So with that being said, I would like to leave everyone with, our typical final thought, and that is, life is happening for you, not to you. So go out there and fail.
If it's not I'm stronger than you, it's I'm wiser than you, I'm more loving than you, I'm more tolerant than you, I'm more sophisticated than you. It doesn't matter what it is, but this constant competition is going on.